The porch light flickered as Ethan stood there, heart hammering against his ribs. Victoria's hand was still on his arm, warm, steady, dangerous. Behind them, through the window, he could see his phone lighting up. Text after text. Lena's name flashing across the screen. Her mother looked at him, really looked at him, and asked the question that would crack his world wide open. Are you here because you're lost, or because you already know exactly what you want? He should have walked away right then, should have gotten in his truck and driven straight home to the safe, numb life he'd built. But he didn't move. Not one damn inch. Hey, thanks for clicking on this story. What you're about to hear, it's messy, it's complicated, and it's the kind of thing that'll make you question what the hell you'd do in the same situation. If you stick around to the end, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. All right, let's get into it. Ethan Cole sat in his truck outside the diner, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might actually hold his life together. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could see her inside. Michelle, her name was, laughing at something on her phone while she waited. Pretty smile. Nice laugh. The kind of woman his friends kept saying he needed. He turned the key. The engine died. Screw it, he muttered. He didn't go inside. Instead, he sat there in the parking lot for another 10 minutes, watching Michelle check her watch, watching her smile fade into confusion, then annoyance, then nothing at all as she finally stood up and walked out. She didn't even look toward his truck, just got in her car and left. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar weight settle back onto his chest. The weight that had been there for 3 years, ever since Lena left. He should feel guilty. He'd just stood up a perfectly nice woman who'd done absolutely nothing wrong except agree to have dinner with a guy who clearly wasn't ready. But guilt required energy, and Ethan Cole was running on empty. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister Jamie. How's the date going? Please tell me you're actually trying this time. He stared at the message, then turned his phone face down on the passenger seat. The rain picked up, drumming harder against the roof. Ethan started the truck again, but he didn't drive home. Home meant facing the babysitter's knowing look when he showed up early again. Home meant walking past Dylan's room and seeing the drawing his son had made, stick figures of the three of them, back when them still included Lena. Instead, he drove. His hands knew where they were going before his brain caught up. East on Highway 42, past the auto shop where he worked, past the elementary school, past the neighborhoods that gradually spread farther apart until the houses became estates hidden behind gates and trees. The Hale estate sat at the end of a long gravel drive, and it wasn't what most people expected when they heard Billionaire. No gold gates. No fountain. Just a sprawling farmhouse that had been in Victoria's family for 4 generations, painted white with black shutters and a wraparound porch that Ethan had helped repair last summer. He'd done a lot of odd jobs there over the past year. Fixed the deck, replaced some rotted siding, rewired the garage. Victoria always paid well. Too well, really, but that wasn't why he kept coming back. The porch light was on. Ethan sat in the driveway for a full minute, watching rain slide down the windshield, asking himself what the hell he was doing. It was almost 9 o'clock. He had no reason to be here. No broken fixture to fix, no legitimate excuse, but his feet were already moving. The porch boards creaked under his boots as he climbed the steps. Before he could knock, the door opened. Victoria stood there in jeans and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back in a loose bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked at him without surprise, like guys showed up on her doorstep in the rain all the time. Ethan? I know it's late. It's fine. She stepped back. Come in before you drown. The house smelled like coffee and old books. Victoria led him through to the kitchen where papers were spread across the table. Financial statements, investment reports, the kind of work that came with managing the kind of money most people couldn't conceptualize. Coffee? She asked. Sure. She poured 2 cups without asking how he took it. She already knew. Black, no sugar. They'd had enough conversations on that porch over the past year for her to know. Ethan wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. Victoria leaned against the counter, watching him with those steady gray eyes that never seemed to judge, just observe. Bad date? She asked. He almost laughed. Didn't make it inside. Cold feet or wrong person? Maybe both. He took a sip of coffee. It was good. Everything Victoria did seemed effortless like that. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. With dating? With everything. Victoria tilted her head slightly, considering him. She was 30 years old, 2 years younger than him, but she carried herself with the kind of calm that made Ethan feel like a kid sometimes. Not in a condescending way, just grounded, like she'd figured out something fundamental about life that he was still stumbling toward. You want to sit? She asked. They moved to the living room. The fire was already going, crackling quietly in the stone fireplace. Ethan sank into the leather couch that probably cost more than his truck, but somehow didn't feel pretentious, just comfortable. Victoria sat in the armchair across from him, tucking her legs underneath her. So, she said, talk. And somehow he did. He told her about Michelle, about the 3 other dates before that, all ending the same way, polite conversations that went nowhere, goodnight hugs that felt hollow, the drive home wondering why he even bothered. I keep thinking something's wrong with me, he said, like there's some switch that's supposed to flip and mine's just broken. Or maybe, Victoria said quietly, you're not actually ready and you keep going through the motions hoping readiness will just show up. The words hit harder than they should have. Jamie says I need to move on, Ethan continued. Says it's been 3 years. Says Dylan needs to see me happy. What do you say? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. I don't know if I remember how. Victoria didn't offer empty reassurance, didn't tell him it would get better, or that time heals all wounds, or any of the other bullshit people had been feeding him since Lena left. She just sat there, present, letting the silence stretch. Finally, she spoke. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Are you lonely? Or are you actually ready? Ethan looked up at her. What's the difference? Lonely makes you look for anyone to fill the space. Ready means you know what you want. She paused. You came here tonight instead of going home, instead of going on that date. Why? He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, and it scared the hell out of him. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm against the windows. The fire popped softly. Victoria's eyes stayed on his, patient, waiting. I don't know, he finally said. Yes, you do. And maybe she was right. Maybe some part of him did know, buried underneath 3 years of numbness and routine and convincing himself that what he felt didn't matter as long as he kept moving forward. Tell me about her, Victoria said. About Lena. Most people didn't ask. They knew enough. The whole town knew. Lena Hale, the brilliant daughter of Haven Ridge's wealthiest family, who'd gotten a scholarship to Stanford and left her high school boyfriend behind, who'd promised to make it work, to come back, to not let distance change things, who'd sent the email 2 years later saying she'd met someone else, someone who fit her new life better. We were kids, Ethan said. I thought I knew what love was, thought we were building something. You were. She left. She chose a different path. That doesn't erase what you built. It just means the foundation wasn't strong enough for the weight of who she was becoming. Ethan turned that over in his mind. It was probably the kindest way anyone had ever framed it. Does it get easier? He asked. Talking to your ex's mom about this? A small smile touched Victoria's lips. Lena and I haven't spoken in over a year. We email occasionally, holidays, birthdays. That's about it. That surprised him. Everyone in town assumed the Hale family was close, united by money and legacy. But sitting here seeing the quiet sadness in Victoria's eyes when she mentioned her daughter, Ethan realized how wrong that assumption was. She doesn't come home? Not often. She's building her life out there. I respect that. Victoria's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. But respect doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I'm sorry. Don't be. We all make choices. She looked at him directly. The question is whether we make them because they're right or because they're easier. Which did Lena make? I honestly don't know. Which did you? Ethan felt the question land in his chest. I stayed, he said. I took the stable job. I bought the house. He stopped, the words catching in his throat. You had Dylan, Victoria finished gently. Yeah, Dylan. His 7-year-old son who looked so much like Lena, it sometimes hurt to look at him. The kid who asked every few months when mommy was coming home, even though Ethan had explained 100 times that she wasn't. "That's not an easier choice," Victoria said. "That's the hard one, the right one." "Doesn't always feel right." "No, it just feels like survival." The way she said it, like she knew exactly what that felt like, made Ethan look at her differently. Really look. Not as Lena's mom, not as the billionaire who lived in the big house on the hill, just as Victoria. A woman sitting in a too-quiet house, working late into the night, with a daughter who'd chosen distance over closeness. "Can I ask you something now?" Ethan said. "Fair's fair." "Why do you live here alone? You could live anywhere. Do anything." Victoria's smile was sad. "Because anywhere feels empty when you've spent your whole life building things for other people." She paused. "My father built this empire. My husband expanded it. Lena was supposed to inherit it. And me? I was just supposed to keep it all running smoothly. Past tense? My father's gone. My husband left 10 years ago. Lena wants nothing to do with the business. So now I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and absolutely no idea what it's for." There was something raw in her voice that Ethan had never heard before. "That's why I like when you come by," she continued quietly. "The repairs, the projects. It's nice to have something that actually needs fixing, something tangible." Her hand rested on the arm of the chair. Without thinking, Ethan reached out and covered it with his own. The touch lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then Victoria gently pulled back, standing up. "It's late," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You should get home to Dylan." Ethan stood too, feeling like he'd crossed some invisible line without meaning to. "Victoria, I know." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're welcome here, Ethan. Any time. But we both know this only works if it stays what it is." "What is it?" She didn't answer right away. Just walked him to the door, the silence stretching between them like a held breath. "Friendship," she finally said. "Isn't it?" Ethan looked at her standing there in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of her home, and he wanted to agree, wanted to take the easy answer and leave things uncomplicated, but the words wouldn't come. "Yeah," he finally said. "Friendship." Victoria nodded, but something in her expression said she heard the hesitation. "Drive safe," she said. The rain had stopped by the time Ethan reached his truck. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, hands on the wheel, staring back at the house. The porch light was still on, and for the first time in 3 years, something inside his chest that had felt frozen solid began, very slowly, to crack. The babysitter, Mrs. Chen, was asleep on the couch when Ethan got home. He paid her, apologized for being late, and walked her to her car. Then he stood in his living room, surrounded by the accumulated debris of single parenthood. Dylan's toys scattered across the floor, dishes in the sink, laundry basket overflowing, and felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. He felt something. He just didn't know what to call it yet. He checked on Dylan, who was sprawled across his bed in that boneless way kids sleep, one arm hanging off the mattress, mouth slightly open. Ethan pulled the blanket up over his son's shoulders and sat on the edge of the bed for a while, just watching him breathe. "I'm trying, buddy," he whispered. "I'm really trying." Dylan didn't stir. Ethan's phone buzzed as he was getting ready for bed. A text from Jamie. "Well?" He typed back. "Didn't go." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Jesus, Ethan, what are you doing? I don't know. You need to talk to someone, like professionally." "Maybe." "Not maybe." "Yes, this isn't healthy." Ethan stared at the message, then set his phone on the nightstand without responding. Jamie meant well, she always did, but she didn't understand that talking to a therapist about Lena wouldn't change the fundamental problem. The problem wasn't that he missed Lena. The problem was that he didn't miss her enough. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and let his mind drift back to Victoria's living room. The warmth of the fire, the steadiness in her voice, the way she'd looked at him when he touched her hand, not angry, not uncomfortable, just aware. Friendship, she'd called it. But friendship didn't explain why his heart had started racing when their hands touched. Didn't explain why he'd driven to her house instead of going home. Didn't explain why, even now, lying alone in his bed, all he could think about was the way she'd said his name. Ethan. Like she actually saw him. Not as Lena's ex, not as the guy who'd gotten left behind, just him. He rolled over, punched his pillow, and tried to sleep. It didn't work. But the next morning arrived with Dylan jumping on his bed at 6:47 a.m., which was somehow both too early and exactly on schedule. Dad, we're going to be late. It's Saturday, Dill. Soccer, remember? Shit, Ethan had completely forgotten about soccer. 20 minutes later, they were in the truck, Dylan chattering about his team's chances while Ethan tried to wake up enough to drive safely. The kid had inherited Lena's energy, always moving, always talking, always burning through life at a pace that left Ethan feeling exhausted just watching. But he'd also inherited her smile. And sometimes when Dylan laughed a certain way, Ethan saw the girl he'd fallen in love with at 17. The girl who'd believed the world was full of possibilities, before she'd learned that some possibilities meant leaving other things behind. The soccer field was chaos, kids running in every direction, parents clustered in lawn chairs, the smell of coffee and damp grass hanging in the cool morning air. Ethan set up his chair on the sideline and tried to look interested as a bunch of 7-year-olds kicked a ball around with no discernible strategy. Ethan! He turned to see Marcus Chen jogging over, coffee in hand. Marcus was married to the babysitter's daughter, father of one of Dylan's teammates, and the closest thing Ethan had to a friend these days. Heard you had a date last night, Marcus said, dropping into the chair next to him. How'd it go? Didn't. Ah. Marcus took a sip of coffee. Want to talk about it? Not really. Cool. Want to pretend to care about this game instead? Absolutely. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the kids chase the ball like a swarm of bees. Dylan actually got a touch, which seemed like progress. You know what your problem is? Marcus said eventually. I wasn't aware we were doing this conversation. Your problem is you're still comparing everyone to her. I'm not. You are. Every woman you meet, you're measuring them against Lena. And guess what? They're all going to come up short because you're not comparing them to the real Lena. You're comparing them to the version of her you've built up in your head over 3 years. Ethan wanted to argue, but the words rang uncomfortably true. So what do I do? Stop dating for a while. Actually deal with your shit. Maybe talk to someone who isn't me or your sister. Marcus paused. Or keep showing up to dates you don't want to go on until you hate yourself enough to change. Your call. You give terrible advice. And yet, here we are. Dylan scored a goal, or maybe the other team scored on themselves. It was hard to tell. And both parents cheered obligingly. Around them, the normal chaos of suburban weekend life continued. Kids playing, parents talking, everyone going through the motions of building the life they were supposed to want. Ethan felt like a ghost watching it all from the outside. After the game, he took Dylan to the diner for pancakes. The same diner where he'd stood up Michelle last night. He half expected to see her there, but the universe wasn't quite that cruel. Dad? Dylan said through a mouthful of syrup. Yeah, bud. When is Mom coming to visit? The question landed like it always did, unexpected, even though Ethan should have learned to expect it by now. I don't know, Dill. She said maybe for my birthday. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Lena had said a lot of maybes over the years. Very few of them had turned into actuallys. We'll see, he said, which was the coward's answer, but the only one he had. Dylan accepted this with the resilience of a kid who'd heard it before. He went back to his pancakes, and Ethan went back to his coffee, and they both pretended everything was fine. But later, driving home, Dylan asked another question. Do you think Mom still loves us? Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yeah, buddy, of course she does. Then why doesn't she come home? Because sometimes love isn't enough. Because people grow and change and want different things. Because your mom is building a life out there that doesn't have room for the life she left behind. But he couldn't say that to a 7-year-old. She's busy with work, Ethan said instead. But she loves you very much. Dylan was quiet for a moment, then, do you still love her? The question shouldn't have surprised him, but it did. Ethan thought about lying. thought about giving the easy answer, the one that would make sense to his son. But something in him rebelled against it. "I'll always care about your mom," he said carefully. "But love changes sometimes. It's complicated. Adults always say things are complicated. That's because they usually are. That's a dumb answer." "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "It really is." They drove the rest of the way in silence. When they got home, Dylan disappeared into his room with his tablet, and Ethan stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Ethan Cole?" A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. "Speaking. This is Jennifer Marks from Haven Ridge Elementary. I'm calling about your son, Dylan." Ethan's heart jumped. "Is he okay?" "He's fine. Sorry, I should have led with that. I'm actually calling about an incident yesterday at school. Dylan got into a fight with another student." "Dylan? My Dylan?" "Yes, it wasn't serious. No one was hurt. But we do have a policy about physical altercations. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you to discuss it." Ethan closed his eyes. Perfect. Just perfect. They scheduled the meeting for Monday morning. When Ethan hung up, he walked to Dylan's room and knocked on the door. "Yeah?" Ethan pushed it open. Dylan was lying on his bed, scrolling through videos on his tablet, the picture of innocence. "Want to tell me about the fight at school?" Dylan's face went carefully blank. "It wasn't a big deal. The principal called me. Seems like it was kind of a big deal. Tommy said something mean." "About what?" Dylan's eyes dropped to his tablet. "About you." Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed. "What did he say?" "He said you're sad all the time. He said his mom said you're broken because mom left." Dylan's voice got smaller. "I told him you're not broken. And then I pushed him." Something cracked in Ethan's chest. He reached out and pulled Dylan into a hug. The kid resisted for about half a second, then melted into it, small arms wrapping around Ethan's waist. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. "For what?" "For making you feel like you had to defend me." "But you're not broken." "No, I'm not broken." Ethan pulled back, looking at his son's serious face. "I'm just figuring some stuff out. And I know that's been hard on you, but that's my job to deal with, not yours." "Are you going to be okay?" The question was too big for a 7-year-old to be asking, but Dylan asked it anyway because kids see things adults try to hide. "Yeah," Ethan said, "I am." He wasn't sure if it was true, but he wanted it to be. Sunday passed in the usual blur of household chores and meal prep and trying to keep Dylan entertained. Ethan mowed the lawn, fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom, and did 3 loads of laundry. All the normal things that filled a life without actually meaning anything. But his mind kept drifting, to Victoria's living room, to the weight of her hand under his, to the question she'd asked, "Are you lonely, or are you actually ready?" Monday morning, Ethan dropped Dylan off at school and headed to his meeting with Principal Marks. It was exactly as awkward as expected. Lots of talk about teaching conflict resolution and appropriate responses to emotional situations. Ethan nodded and agreed and promised to talk to Dylan about using his words instead of his hands. But as he walked back to his truck, all he could think about was what Dylan had said. "Tommy's mom thinks you're broken." Was that what people saw when they looked at him? A broken man going through the motions? The guy who got left behind, still licking his wounds 3 years later? The thought pissed him off more than it should have. He wasn't broken. He was just stuck. And maybe the only person who seemed to see the difference was Victoria. Without consciously deciding to, Ethan found himself driving toward the Hale estate. He told himself it was because the gutter on the east side of the house had been sagging last time he was there. Told himself he was just being responsible, checking on a repair that might need attention. But he knew that was bullshit. He pulled up the gravel drive and parked. Victoria's car was there, which meant she was home. Ethan sat for a moment, trying to decide if this was a mistake. Then he got out of the truck. She answered on the second knock, wearing jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. There was a smudge of blue on her cheek. "Ethan." She looked surprised, but not unhappy. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, The gutter looked like it might need another look." Victoria glanced toward the east side of the house, then back at him. A small smile touched her lips. The gutter. Yeah. Okay. She stepped aside. Want some coffee first? They ended up in the kitchen again. Seemed like that's where their conversations always happened. Victoria poured coffee while Ethan sat at the table, feeling like an idiot for showing up with such a transparent excuse. I'm painting the guest room, Victoria said, gesturing to her stained clothes. Probably should have hired someone, but I needed the distraction. From what? Life. She handed him a mug and leaned against the counter. How'd the meeting at school go? Ethan shouldn't have been surprised she knew about it. Small town, everyone knowing everyone's business. Fine. Dylan pushed a kid who said something mean about me. Defending his dad's honor. Can't fault him for that. Kid called me broken. Victoria's expression shifted. Are you? There was the question again. Different words, same meaning. I don't know, Ethan admitted. Some days I feel like I'm held together with duct tape and stubbornness. That's not broken. That's just being human. Is it? Victoria moved to the table and sat down across from him. When she looked at him, it was with that steady gaze that made him feel seen in a way that was both comforting and terrifying. After my husband left, she said quietly, I spent 2 years convinced I was fundamentally flawed, that there was something wrong with me that made people leave. Lena went to college and barely called. My father got sick and pushed me away. Everyone I loved seemed to be telling me I wasn't enough. But eventually, I realized they weren't leaving because of me. They were leaving because they had their own paths to follow. And my mistake was thinking I needed to be part of their journey instead of figuring out my own. Ethan turned the mug in his hands. How'd you do that? Figure out your own path? I'm still working on it, she smiled softly. But I started by stopping, by sitting in the quiet and actually feeling what I was avoiding. And you know what I found? What? That most of what I thought I wanted was actually just what I thought I was supposed to want. The perfect family, the legacy business. All of it was someone else's dream that I'd been trying to fit myself into. The words resonated in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. So, what do you want now? He asked. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. I want something real, she said finally. Something that doesn't require pretending. The air between them shifted, became heavier, more aware. Ethan knew he should change the subject, should finish his coffee and go look at that gutter and drive home, should maintain the careful boundary they'd established on Friday night. Instead, he said, Me too. Victoria's breath caught, just slightly, just enough for him to notice. They sat there in her kitchen, coffee going cold, the late morning sun streaming through the windows, and something unspoken settled between them like a third presence at the table. This was dangerous. They both knew it, but neither of them moved. Finally, Victoria stood up, breaking the moment. Let me show you the guest room, she said. You can tell me if I'm doing this paint job completely wrong. They walked upstairs together, and Ethan tried not to notice how close she was. Tried not to notice the paint in her hair, or the way her shoulder brushed his on the narrow stairs, or the fact that being in this house with her felt more like home than his actual home ever did. The guest room was half painted, one wall a soft sage green, the rest still the boring beige it had been before. What do you think? Victoria asked. I think, Ethan said slowly, you're overthinking it. It's just a guest room. Nothing's just anything. He looked at her. What's it really about? Victoria picked up a paintbrush, turning it over in her hands. Lena called last week. She's getting married. The words landed between them like a stone in still water. Oh. To someone I've never met. Someone she's known for less than a year. Victoria's voice was carefully controlled. She sent me a picture. He looks nice. Successful. Exactly the kind of person she should be with. Victoria, I'm happy for her. I am. But she told me over email. Didn't even call, just, here's a picture. We're getting married. I'll send you the details. She set the paintbrush down. And I realized I've been using this house like a museum, keeping everything the same, hoping if I just preserved it all perfectly, my family would eventually come back to it. So you're painting the guest room. I'm accepting that they're not coming back. And that maybe that's okay. She looked at him. But it's hard to let go of what you thought your life would be. Ethan understood that more than she knew. He picked up a paint roller. Want help? They spent the next 3 hours painting, not talking much, just working side by side, covering the old beige with new green, transforming the space into something different, something that belonged to now instead of before. At some point, Victoria turned on music, old rock, the kind with actual guitars, and they fell into an easy rhythm. She'd paint the edges, he'd fill in the walls. When they finished one wall, they'd step back and admire it together before moving on to the next. It was simple, uncomplicated, real. And somewhere in those 3 hours, with paint on their hands and music playing and sunlight shifting across the floor, Ethan felt something shift inside himself too. This thing between them, whatever it was, wasn't going away. And maybe he was tired of pretending it would. They finished the last wall as the afternoon light started to fade. Victoria stood back, hands on her hips, surveying their work. "Not bad," she said. "Better than not bad. It's actually good." She smiled, and Ethan noticed the paint smudge on her cheek had been joined by several more. Without thinking, he reached out to wipe one away. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything else fell away. Victoria didn't pull back, didn't move at all, just stood there, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her gray eyes, the way her breath had quickened slightly. "Ethan," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a rejection. It was just his name, spoken like a warning and an invitation all at once. He should step back, should laugh it off, should remember all the very good reasons why this was a terrible idea. But his hand was still on her face, and she still hadn't moved, and the only thing he could think was how long it had been since something had felt this true. A door slammed downstairs. They jumped apart like teenagers caught making out. Victoria's hand went to her chest, Ethan's to the back of his neck. "Miss Hale," a woman's voice called from below. "I brought those documents you wanted to review." "That's Margaret," Victoria said, her voice slightly breathless. "My assistant." "Right." They stared at each other for another beat, the moment thoroughly broken, but its echo still hanging between them. "I should go," Ethan said. "Probably." But neither of them moved. Finally, Victoria walked to the door. She paused in the frame, looking back at him. "Thank you," she said, "for the help." "Any time." She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else. Then she just nodded and headed downstairs, calling out a greeting to Margaret. Ethan stood in the freshly painted room, heart still racing, and knew with absolute certainty that he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. And the scariest part? He didn't want to. Ethan drove home with paint on his jeans and Victoria's perfume still lingering in his memory. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, trying to convince himself that what happened in that guest room was nothing. Just a moment. Just proximity and loneliness combining into something that felt bigger than it actually was. Except it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like the first real thing he'd felt in 3 years. Dylan was at Jamie's house for the afternoon, which meant Ethan came home to an empty house and too much time to think. He tried not to. Threw himself into cleaning the kitchen, organizing the garage, fixing the loose hinge on the bathroom door. Anything to keep his hands busy and his mind quiet. It didn't work. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Victoria looking at him in that painted room, saw the way her breath had caught when he touched her face, saw the moment stretching between them like a wire pulled taut, vibrating with everything they weren't saying. His phone buzzed around 6. A text from an unknown number. "You left your jacket." His heart jumped before his brain could catch up. He'd been wearing his work jacket. Must have left it on the back of a chair when they started painting. "I can grab it tomorrow." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Or you could come get it now. I made too much pasta." Ethan stared at the message. This was a choice. A clear, conscious choice. Going back there tonight, after what happened this afternoon, wasn't about a jacket or pasta. They both knew it. He should text back something polite, something that created distance. Should say he'd get the jacket later. "Thanks anyway. Have a good night." Instead, he typed, "Be there in 20. The drive felt longer this time. Every mile giving him another chance to turn around, to make the smart choice, the safe choice. But his truck kept moving forward. Victoria met him at the door in different clothes, soft gray pants, and a white button-down that made her look simultaneously casual and elegant in a way Ethan couldn't figure out. Her hair was down now, falling past her shoulders. "Hey," she said. "Hey." They stood there for a beat too long, neither quite sure what to do with the weight of what wasn't being said. "Come on," Victoria finally said, stepping aside, "before it gets cold." The kitchen table was set for two. Nothing fancy, just plates and forks and a big bowl of pasta with what looked like homemade sauce. A bottle of red wine sat in the center, already open. "You didn't have to do all this," Ethan said. "I was cooking anyway." She handed him a glass of wine. "And I actually do have your jacket." "I know." Their eyes met. Victoria's lips curved into a small smile. "Okay," she said quietly. "Just making sure we're being honest." They sat down and ate, and for the first 20 minutes, the conversation stayed safe. Dylan's soccer team, the weather turning colder, some charity event Victoria had to attend next week. Normal things, easy things, but the air between them felt anything but normal. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "Sure." "Why'd you really invite me back tonight?" Victoria set down her fork, considering the question. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "Because I spent the last 4 hours trying to convince myself that what happened this afternoon was just a moment, just two lonely people standing too close." She looked at him. "But I couldn't make myself believe it." The honesty landed in Ethan's chest like a weight. "Yeah," he said. "Me neither." "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know." Victoria reached for her wine glass, her fingers tracing the stem. "This is complicated, you know. You and me. It's not just... We have history, shared history. Lena is my daughter, and your ex and Dylan's mother. That doesn't just go away because we pretend it doesn't exist." "I know. And people will talk. In this town, people always talk." "I know that too." "So why are you here?" Ethan took a breath. "Because when I'm here, I don't feel numb. And I've spent 3 years feeling numb, and I'm so goddamn tired of it." Victoria's eyes softened. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at him like she was trying to see past all the words to what he actually meant. "I think about it sometimes," she said quietly. "What my life would be like if I'd made different choices. If I'd walked away from the business when my father wanted me to take over. If I'd fought harder to keep my marriage alive. If I'd been a different kind of mother to Lena. You can't change the past. No. But you can keep letting it define your future, or you can choose something different." She paused. "The question is what you're actually choosing, because comfort and connection aren't the same thing, Ethan, and I won't be someone's comfortable escape." The words hit harder than she probably meant them to. "Is that what you think this is?" he asked. "I don't know what this is. That's the problem." Ethan pushed his plate aside and leaned forward. "You asked me the other night if I was lonely or ready. I didn't have an answer then, but I've been thinking about it." "And?" "I think I've been confusing moving on with moving forward. Trying to date because that's what you're supposed to do. Trying to feel something for women who deserve better than a guy who's just going through the motions." He held her gaze. "But with you, I'm not going through motions. I'm actually here." Victoria's breath caught slightly. "That scares me." "Why?" "Because I've spent 10 years building walls, getting comfortable being alone, convincing myself that peace was better than risk." She smiled sadly. "And then you show up on my porch in the rain, and I can feel those walls cracking. Would that be so bad?" "It would be terrifying." They sat in the quiet that followed, the weight of honesty settling around them. Outside, the evening had turned dark, and the kitchen felt like its own small world, separate from everything else. Victoria stood up and started clearing the plates. Ethan joined her, and they moved around the kitchen in that easy rhythm they'd found while painting, her washing, him drying, no words needed. But when she handed him the last plate, their fingers touched. Neither of them pulled away. Victoria looked up at him, and something in her expression had shifted. The careful control she usually wore had slipped, and what Ethan saw underneath was want, raw and honest and scared. "We shouldn't," she said softly. "I know. It'll change everything." "Yeah." But neither of them moved. The plate was still between them, their fingers still touching, and Ethan could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. Victoria set the plate down on the counter. Her hand came up to his chest, resting there like she was testing something. like she was feeling for proof that this was real. "Tell me this isn't just because you're lonely," she said. "It's not. But tell me you're not going to wake up tomorrow and regret this." "I can't promise that." He covered her hand with his. "But I can promise I'm here because I want to be, not because I'm running from something else." Victoria searched his face for another long moment. Then, slowly, she rose up on her toes. The kiss was soft at first, careful, like they were both still giving each other the chance to pull back. But then Victoria's hand slid up to his neck, and Ethan's wrapped around her waist, and careful became something else entirely. It became desperate, honest. 3 years of numbness and loneliness and wanting something real, all pouring out in the way they held each other. Victoria made a small sound in the back of her throat, and Ethan pulled her closer, and for the first time in so long, he felt alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria's forehead rested against his. "Well," she said, voice shaky, "that was... yeah." They stood there, wrapped up in each other, neither quite ready to let go. But reality was already creeping back in, the weight of what they'd just done, the complications waiting outside this moment. Victoria pulled back slightly, her hands still on his shoulders. "I need you to be sure," she said. "Because once we do this, once we actually do this, there's no going back to how things were. I'm sure. Are you? Or are you just sure right now, in this moment, when everything feels good and possible?" Her eyes held his. "Because tomorrow, you're going to wake up in your house. You're going to make Dylan breakfast. You're going to drive past people who knew you and Lena as a couple. And you're going to have to decide if this is still what you want, when it's not just us in this kitchen." Oh, Ethan knew she was right. Knew that what felt clear and simple right now would get complicated fast in the light of day. But he also knew he was tired of living half a life. "I'm not saying it'll be easy," he said. "But yeah, I'm sure." Victoria studied him for another moment, then nodded slowly. She took his hand and led him out of the kitchen, through the living room, up the stairs to her bedroom. And Ethan followed, making a choice he couldn't unmake, crossing a line he couldn't uncross. And for the first time in 3 years, not caring about the consequences. The next morning arrived too early and too bright. Ethan woke up in Victoria's bed, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and had about 30 seconds of peace before reality crashed back in. He'd slept with his ex's mother, Victoria's mother, Dylan's grandmother. The thought should have filled him with regret, should have sent him scrambling out of bed, grabbing his clothes, making excuses. But when he looked over at Victoria, still asleep, hair spread across the pillow, face peaceful in a way he'd never seen while she was awake, all he felt was certain. Complicated, yes. Messy, absolutely. But certain. Victoria's eyes opened. For a moment she just looked at him, and Ethan braced himself for the morning after panic. For her to say this was a mistake, that they needed to pretend it never happened. Instead she said, "Hi." "Hi? You're still here." "Where else would I be?" A small smile touched her lips. "Most men would have run by now." "I'm not most men." "No," she agreed quietly. "You're not." They lay there for a while, not talking, just existing in the strange intimacy of morning light and shared space. Eventually, Victoria glanced at the clock. "Don't you need to get Dylan?" Shit, Dylan. Ethan had completely forgotten he was supposed to pick him up from Jamie's by 9. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand. 3 missed calls from his sister and 2 texts. "Dylan wants to stay for breakfast." "That cool?" "Never mind, feeding him anyway. Come by whenever." Relief flooded through him. "I have time." Victoria propped herself up on one elbow, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What happens now?" "What do you want to happen?" "That's not an answer." Ethan sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know the right answer here, Victoria. I don't know what the protocol is for this situation." "There isn't one. That's the problem. So we make it up as we go. And when people find out? When Lena finds out? Does she need to know?" Victoria's expression shifted. "You want to hide this?" "I didn't say that. I just..." Ethan stopped, trying to find the right words. "I don't think we need to announce it. Not yet. Not until we figure out what this actually is." "And what do you think it is?" "Honestly, I have no idea. But I'd like the chance to find out without the whole town watching. Victoria considered this, then nodded slowly. Okay, we keep it quiet for now. But Ethan, if this is going to be something real, eventually people will know. And we need to be ready for that. I know. Do you? Because it's not just gossip we're talking about. It's your son, my daughter, our families. She paused. Are you prepared for Dylan to know you're seeing his grandmother? The words sounded even more absurd said out loud. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But I'm not ready to walk away from this either. Victoria reached out and took his hand. Neither am I. Which I think makes us both either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. She laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and genuine, and Ethan felt something in his chest loosen. They got up eventually. Victoria made coffee while Ethan found his clothes scattered across her bedroom floor. Domestic and surreal all at once. In the kitchen, they moved around each other carefully, both hyper-aware of every touch, every glance. The ease from last night had been replaced by something more tentative, like they were learning a new dance and hadn't quite found the rhythm yet. What are you doing today? Victoria asked, handing him a mug. Picking up Dylan, then probably just hanging around the house. You? I have a charity board meeting at 2, the Haven Ridge Community Foundation. Sounds thrilling. It's exactly as boring as it sounds. She smiled. But it's important, so? They sipped their coffee in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, and something in her expression changed. What? Ethan asked. It's Lena. The name landed between them like a dropped brick. Victoria picked up the phone, reading the message. Her jaw tightened slightly. She wants to come home for Thanksgiving with her fiancé. That's good, right? Sure. Victoria set the phone down. She'll want to see Dylan, obviously. The implication hung unspoken in the air. Lena would come home and she'd be in Haven Ridge, and whatever was happening between Ethan and Victoria would have to exist in the same space as his past with her daughter. We'll deal with it when it happens, Ethan said. Will we? What choice do we have? Victoria didn't answer, just looked down at her coffee like it might hold some solution to the impossible situation they'd created. Ethan finished his drink and set the mug in the sink. I should go. Yeah. He hesitated, then crossed to where she stood and kissed her, brief but real. When he pulled back, Victoria's eyes were closed. I'll call you, he said. Okay. But walking to his truck, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the certainty of last night was already starting to crack under the weight of daylight. He picked up Dylan from Jamie's house 20 minutes later. His sister took one look at him and raised an eyebrow. Long night? Just couldn't sleep. Uh-huh. Jamie handed him a Tupperware of leftover pancakes. Dylan, your dad's here! Dylan came barreling out, backpack swinging. Dad, can we go to the park? Sure, bud. In the truck, Dylan chattered about his sleepover with Jamie's kids while Ethan drove on autopilot, his mind still stuck in Victoria's kitchen. Dad, you're not listening. Sorry, what'd you say? I asked if we can visit Grandma Victoria soon. I haven't seen her in forever. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. Dylan had always called Victoria Grandma Victoria, even though she wasn't technically his grandmother. It was just what he'd grown up calling her, back when Ethan and Lena were together and the families were still connected. Maybe, Ethan said carefully. Why? Because she's nice, and her house is cool, and she always has good cookies. Simple kid logic. Uncomplicated. If only it could stay that way. They spent the afternoon at the park, Dylan running around with other kids while Ethan sat on a bench and tried not to think about the mess he'd just walked into. But his phone kept buzzing with work texts, friend texts, a reminder about Dylan's upcoming parent-teacher conference. Normal life. Continuing on like nothing had changed, except everything had changed. That night, after Dylan was in bed, Ethan sat on his back porch with a beer and stared at his phone. He wanted to text Victoria, wanted to hear her voice, wanted confirmation that last night wasn't just a moment of weakness they'd both regret. But he didn't know what to say. Finally, around 10, his phone buzzed. Victoria. You okay? He typed back, yeah, you? Honestly, I'm terrified. Of what? Everything. This. Us. What it means. Want me to come over? The three dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Yes, but you shouldn't. Ethan stared at the message, feeling the truth of it. They needed space. Needed to think clearly without the pull of proximity. Tomorrow, he typed, I have meetings all day. Thursday? Thursday works. Okay. Sleep well, Ethan. You too. He set the phone down and took a long pull of his beer. 2 days. He could handle 2 days of normal life while he figured out what the hell he was doing. Except normal life had other plans. Tuesday morning, Ethan was under a Honda Civic at the shop when Marcus appeared, rolling his creeper over. So, Marcus said, heard something interesting yesterday. Ethan's stomach dropped. Yeah? My wife's cousin works at the Hale estate. Said she saw you there Monday, painting the guest room with Victoria. Shit. She needed help with a project, Ethan said, keeping his voice casual. I've been doing work there for months. Sure. Marcus was quiet for a beat. Just saying, people notice when you spend a lot of time at a single woman's house. It's not like that. No? Because Linda seemed to think it looked pretty cozy. Ethan slid out from under the car, meeting Marcus's eyes. There's nothing going on. The lie tasted bitter in his mouth, but what was he supposed to say? Yeah, actually, I'm sleeping with my ex's billionaire mother. That'll go over great. Marcus held his gaze for a moment, then shrugged. All right, man. Just giving you a heads up. You know how this town is? Yeah, I know. But the conversation rattled him. If people were already noticing, already talking, how long before it became a real problem? That evening, Jamie called. We need to talk about Dylan, she said without preamble. What about him? His teacher called me today. Said he's been distracted lately, not turning in homework, getting into arguments. Ethan closed his eyes. I'm handling it. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're barely holding it together yourself. Jamie, I'm not trying to attack you, E. I'm worried about both of you. Her voice softened. When's the last time you actually talked to Dylan? Like really talked to him about how he's feeling? We talk all the time. About surface stuff, sure. But when's the last time you asked him about Lena? About why he's acting out at school? Ethan didn't have an answer. He's 7 years old, dealing with an absent mother and a dad who's going through the motions, Jamie continued. That's a lot for a kid. I know that. Then do something about it. Get him into therapy. Get yourself into therapy. Stop pretending everything's fine when it clearly isn't. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark living room and faced the truth he'd been avoiding. He'd been so focused on his own pain, his own need to move forward, that he'd stopped seeing how much Dylan was struggling. Wednesday morning, Ethan called the school counselor and set up an appointment for Dylan. Then he called a therapist for himself, something he should have done years ago. Baby steps. That's what Marcus always said. You can't fix everything at once. But that night, lying in bed, all Ethan could think about was Victoria. The way she'd looked at him in the morning light, the way she'd said she was terrified. He was terrified too. Because this thing between them wasn't simple, wasn't easy. And the more real it became, the more it threatened to upend every carefully constructed piece of his life. Thursday afternoon couldn't come fast enough. Ethan dropped Dylan at school and drove straight to the Hale estate. Victoria's car was in the driveway, and when she opened the door, the relief on her face mirrored what he felt. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood there for a beat, the weight of 2 days apart sitting between them. Then Victoria stepped forward and kissed him, and everything else fell away. Inside, they ended up on the couch, Victoria tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder. No words needed, just the comfort of being close. I've been thinking, she said eventually. About? About what you said. About not announcing this. She paused. I think you're right. We need time to figure out what this is before we invite everyone else's opinions. But we also can't hide forever, especially with Lena coming home. Ethan's arm tightened around her. We'll tell her, when the time is right. And when is that? I don't know. After Thanksgiving? After she meets her fiancé's family? After... He trailed off. After it's too late to back out? Maybe. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, my board meeting yesterday. Someone asked about you. What? Catherine Wright. She's on the foundation board. Her daughter goes to school with Dylan. Victoria shifted to look at him. She said she'd heard you were doing work at my house. Asked if we were friends. What'd you say? That you've been helpful with repairs. That I appreciate your work. She smiled sadly. Which is technically true. But not the whole truth. No. They sat with that for a while, both understanding what it meant. The rumors had already started. The questions were being asked. And every day they spent together, every moment like this, was another thread being woven into a story they couldn't control. Do you regret it? Ethan asked quietly. Any of this? Victoria turned to face him fully, her hand coming up to cup his cheek. No, she said firmly. I regret a lot of things in my life, but this? You. No. Even though it's complicated? Especially because it's complicated. Because complicated means it matters. She kissed him softly. Easy doesn't mean right, Ethan. And right doesn't mean simple. He pulled her closer, and they stayed like that as the afternoon light faded, both knowing that the peace of this moment was borrowed time. Because outside this house, the world was already starting to notice. And sooner or later, they'd have to face it. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm of stolen moments and careful distance. Ethan would find reasons to visit the estate, a loose shutter, a clogged gutter, routine maintenance that probably didn't need doing. Victoria would text him late at night when Dylan was asleep, and they'd talk for hours about nothing and everything. But they were careful. Always careful. Too careful, maybe. Because the harder they tried to keep things quiet, the louder the silence between their real lives became. It was Marcus who finally called him on it. They were closing up the shop on a Friday evening, the first real cold snap of the season settling over Haven Ridge, when Marcus tossed a wrench into the toolbox and looked at Ethan straight on. You gonna tell me what's going on, or are we gonna keep pretending everything's normal? Ethan didn't look up from the invoice he was filing. Nothing's going on. Right. Because you've been whistling while you work for the past week. You, who I've never heard whistle once in the 5 years I've known you. Didn't realize whistling was a crime. It's not. Being happy isn't either. Marcus leaned against the workbench. But lying to your friends kinda sucks. Ethan set down the invoice. I'm not lying. You're not telling the truth either. They stared at each other for a long moment. Ethan wanted to deflect, to change the subject, to keep the walls up that he'd spent years building. But something in Marcus's expression, genuine concern, not judgment, made the walls crack. It's complicated, Ethan said finally. Most good things are. This is different. How? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, searching for words that wouldn't sound insane. You ever feel like you're standing at the edge of something that could either be the best decision you've ever made or completely destroy your life? Yeah, that's called being human. Marcus crossed his arms. Is it Victoria? The question landed like a punch. Ethan's head snapped up. What? Come on, man, I'm not blind. You've been spending half your free time at her place. You get this look on your face when someone mentions her name. Marcus paused. And Linda saw you leaving there at 8 in the morning last week. Shit. Ethan's mind raced, looking for a plausible explanation, a believable excuse. But he was tired of lying, tired of pretending. Yeah, he said quietly. It's Victoria. Marcus was quiet for a long beat, not shocked exactly, just processing. Okay, he finally said. That's it? Just okay. What do you want me to say? That it's weird? It is. That people are going to talk? They will. That you're playing with fire? Marcus shrugged. But I've watched you sleepwalk through the last 3 years. And if she's the thing that wakes you up, then who am I to judge? Something in Ethan's chest loosened. You're the first person I've told. I'm honored. Also, you should probably tell Jamie before she hears it from someone else. Yeah, I know. They finished closing up in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before, the kind that felt like relief instead of burden. Walking to his truck, Ethan's phone buzzed. Victoria. Free tonight? Dylan's at Jamie's. Why? Come over. I'll cook. You always cook. Fine. I'll order takeout and pretend I cooked. Ethan smiled despite himself. Be there in an hour. When he arrived, Victoria met him at the door with Thai food containers and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. They ate on the floor in front of the fireplace, both too restless to sit at the table like civilized adults. "I told Marcus," Ethan said, halfway through his pad thai. Victoria's fork paused. "How'd that go?" "Better than expected. He already knew." "People are noticing." "Yeah." They ate in silence for a moment. Then Victoria set down her container and turned to face him. "Ethan, we need to talk about Thanksgiving." He'd been dreading this conversation. "Okay. Lena arrives Wednesday. She's staying through Sunday." Victoria's voice was measured, controlled. "She wants to have dinner here Thursday with her fiancé. And she asked if you and Dylan would come." Ethan's stomach dropped. "She what?" "She said it would be nice for Dylan to meet James, her fiancé, and she wants to see you both." "Does she know? About us?" "No, she still thinks you're just the handyman who helps out sometimes." Victoria's jaw tightened, "which means we have the choice to make." "What choice?" "We tell her before she gets here, or we wait and risk her finding out from someone else, or—" Victoria paused. "Or we end this before it gets more complicated." The last option hung in the air like smoke. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Is that what you want?" he asked quietly. "No, but I'm trying to be realistic." Victoria's eyes met his. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about Dylan, about Lena, about families and histories and all the things that don't just disappear because we want them to." "So we tell her." "And say what?" "Hi, honey. Welcome home, by the way. I'm sleeping with your ex-boyfriend." When you put it like that— "There's no good way to put it, Ethan. That's the point." Victoria stood up, pacing to the fireplace. "She's my daughter. You're her first love. This will hurt her, no matter how we frame it. She's engaged to someone else. That doesn't mean she won't feel betrayed." Ethan stood too, crossing to where Victoria stood with her arms wrapped around herself. He placed his hands on her shoulders, feeling the tension there. "What do you want to do?" he asked. She turned to face him, and he saw the conflict written across her face, the same war he'd been fighting since this started. "I want to be selfish," she said quietly. "I want to say, screw everyone else, this is my life, and I get to choose. But I'm a mother, and mothers don't get to be selfish. That's not fair." "No, but it's true." They stood there, inches apart, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on both of them. Finally, Victoria spoke again. "We tell her after Thanksgiving. We give her the holiday with her fiancé, let Dylan have time with his mother, and then we sit down and tell her the truth." "You're sure?" "No, but it's the closest thing to right I can think of." Ethan pulled her into his arms, and Victoria let herself be held, her head against his chest. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Winter coming early. "What if she hates us?" Victoria whispered. "Then she hates us. But at least we'll be honest. Sometimes I wonder if honest is worth it. It has to be." They stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other like it might be the last time. Because maybe it would be. Maybe Thanksgiving would blow everything apart, and this fragile thing they'd built would shatter under the weight of family and history and all the very good reasons why they should never have started this in the first place. But for now, they had this moment. And Ethan was learning that sometimes moments were all you got. The week before Thanksgiving passed too quickly. Ethan threw himself into work, into parenting, into the mundane tasks that kept his mind occupied. But every night, after Dylan was asleep, he'd find himself staring at his phone, at the messages from Victoria that had become his lifeline. "Missing you. Same. 3 more days. I know, this is going to be a disaster, isn't it? Probably. But we'll get through it." Except Ethan wasn't sure that was true, because the closer Thanksgiving got, the more real the consequences became. He'd lie awake at night, imagining every possible version of that conversation with Lena. Every way it could go wrong. Every hurt look, every angry word, every friendship and family tie that would snap under the pressure. Dylan, oblivious to the storm brewing, was excited. His mother was coming home. He talked about it constantly, what they'd do together, what he'd show her, whether she'd remember his favorite foods. It broke Ethan's heart a little more each time. Tuesday night, Jamie called. Lena's flight gets in tomorrow at 2, she said. You know that, right? Yeah, I know. Dylan's been asking if he can go to the airport to surprise her. Ethan closed his eyes. What'd you tell him? That I'd ask you. Jamie was quiet for a beat. Are you okay with this? Her being here? Do I have a choice? You always have a choice, E. But that wasn't true. Not really. Because the choice had been made 3 years ago when Lena left and he'd stayed, and Dylan had become the connection that would tie them all together forever. I'm fine, Ethan said. It'll be good for Dylan to see her. And what about you? What about me? Are you going to Thanksgiving dinner? Victoria invited us. It'd be weird if we didn't go. Jamie was quiet for so long that Ethan thought the call had dropped. Jamie? There's something different about you lately, she said finally. I can't put my finger on it, but you seem, I don't know, lighter, maybe, less buried. Is that bad? No, it's good. I'm just trying to figure out what changed. Another pause. Is there someone? Ethan's heart jumped. Why would you ask that? Because you're my brother, and I know you. And the only time you've ever sounded like this was when you were with Lena. Her voice softened. If there is someone, you can tell me. He wanted to. Almost did. But the words stuck in his throat. There's no one, he said. The lie sat heavy between them. Okay, Jamie said, not believing him. But if that changes, I'm here. You know that, right? I know, thanks, Jamie. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark living room and faced the truth he'd been avoiding. In less than 48 hours, Lena would be here. In his town. At Victoria's house. And he'd have to sit across from her at Thanksgiving dinner and pretend that nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. Wednesday arrived cold and gray. Ethan kept Dylan home from school. The kid would have been useless anyway, too excited to concentrate. They spent the morning cleaning the house, making sure everything looked perfect for when Lena came to pick Dylan up for their visit. Because that was the arrangement. Lena would take Dylan for the afternoon and evening, bringing him back Thursday morning in time for Thanksgiving dinner. 3 years of supervised visits and careful coordination, all leading to this. At 1:30, a car pulled into the driveway. Not Lena's old beat-up sedan from high school, but a sleek black rental that probably cost more per day than Ethan made in a week. Dylan was out the door before Ethan could stop him. Mom! Lena stepped out of the car, and Ethan's breath caught. She looked different. Older, obviously, but more than that. Polished. Put together. Like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread about successful young professionals. Her hair was shorter, styled. Designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. The kind of person who belonged in San Francisco boardrooms, not small-town driveways. She caught Dylan in a hug, laughing as he squeezed her tight. Behind her, a man emerged from the passenger side, tall, good-looking in that bland, symmetrical way. Expensive watch. Perfect smile. James! Ethan walked down the driveway, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. Ethan, Lena said, her smile warm but careful. It's good to see you. You too. You look great. Thanks. You look the same. She said it kindly, but Ethan heard what she meant. You look like you never left. Like you're still exactly where I left you. This is James, Lena continued, one hand on her fiancé's arm. James, this is Ethan. They shook hands. James had a firm grip and the kind of confidence that came from never doubting his place in the world. Nice to meet you, James said. Lena's told me a lot about you. I bet she has, Ethan thought. The high school boyfriend who couldn't keep up with her ambitions, the guy she outgrew. Good things, I hope. Of course. James's smile never wavered. And this must be Dylan. Your mom talks about you all the time, buddy. Dylan, already attached to Lena's side, nodded shyly. They made small talk for a few minutes, the flight, the weather, plans for tomorrow's dinner. All surface level and polite. Then Lena checked her watch. We should get going. I promised Dylan we'd hit the arcade before dinner. Sure, have him back by 9. 9:30, Lena countered. We have a lot of catching up to do. Ethan wanted to argue, but knew it would make him look petty. Fine. 9:30. Dylan ran inside to grab his jacket, leaving the 3 adults in awkward silence. So, James said, clearly trying to fill the gap. Lena mentioned you do auto repair. That must be interesting work. It pays the bills. I'm in finance, venture capital specifically. We're looking at some interesting startups in the EV space, actually. The whole industry is about to shift dramatically. James, Lena interrupted gently, I'm sure Ethan doesn't want to lecture on market trends. James laughed. Right, sorry. Occupational hazard. Dylan returned, and they said their goodbyes. Ethan watched the rental car pull away, his son's face pressed to the window, waving until they turned the corner. Then he was alone in his driveway, the silence pressing in around him. His phone buzzed. Victoria. How'd it go? About how you'd expect. She looks happy. Good. That's good. Is it? The three dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. I don't know. Maybe we should talk. I'll come over. Ethan, I don't think that's a good idea. Not with her in town. I need to see you. Another long pause. Back entrance. Park on the service road. 20 minutes later, Ethan was walking through the back gate of the Hale estate, feeling like a teenager sneaking around, which, he supposed, he basically was. Victoria met him at the kitchen door. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She called me this morning, Victoria said without preamble. Wanted to know if you were seeing anyone. Ethan's stomach dropped. What'd you say? That I didn't know, that you kept to yourself. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. She said she hopes you're happy, that you deserve to move on. How generous of her. Don't. Don't what? Be bitter. It's not a good look. Ethan felt the anger flash through him, hot and unexpected. I'm not bitter. I'm just tired of everyone acting like I'm the one who needs fixing, like I'm some charity case that needs permission to live my life. That's not what I meant, isn't it? You just said we shouldn't see each other while she's here, like we're doing something wrong, like we need to hide. We are hiding, Ethan. That's the whole problem. They stared at each other, all the tension of the past week finally boiling over. Maybe this was a mistake, Victoria said quietly. The words hit like a slap. You don't mean that. Don't I? Look at us, sneaking around, lying to everyone, waiting for the right moment that's never going to come. Her voice cracked. This isn't sustainable. So what? We just end it? Pretend nothing happened? Maybe that would be easier. Easier isn't the same as right. You're the one who taught me that. Victoria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I know, but right now, easy sounds pretty good. Ethan crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. Hey, look at me. She did, reluctantly. I'm not walking away from this, he said firmly. I'm not walking away from you. Not because it got hard. Not because people might talk. Not because your daughter is in town for a few days. But no. Listen, I've spent 3 years being careful, being safe, doing what everyone else thought I should do. And you know what? It made me miserable. He held her gaze. But this? You? This is the first thing I've chosen for myself in years, and I'm not giving it up. A tear slipped down Victoria's cheek. She's going to hate me. Maybe, for a while, but she'll get over it. Because she moved on, Victoria. She built a whole new life. She doesn't get to dictate yours. She's my daughter. And you're allowed to have a life that doesn't revolve around her. Victoria leaned into him, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake with silent tears. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other against the storm that was coming. Finally, Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. Okay, she said. Okay? We do this. We tell her. After Thanksgiving. She took a shaky breath. But we do it right. Together. No more hiding. Together, Ethan agreed. They spent the next hour talking through exactly how it would go. When they'd tell her, what they'd say, how to minimize the damage to Dylan. It felt clinical, strategic, like planning a military operation instead of a conversation. But at least they had a plan. Ethan left as the sun was setting, using the back entrance again. As he reached his truck, his phone rang. Jamie. Dylan's back early, she said. Lena dropped him off here. Said she and James had dinner plans. Can you pick him up? Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Yeah, be there in 10. Dylan was quiet on the drive home. Not his usual chatterbox self, just staring out the window, shoulders hunched. You okay, bud? Ethan asked. Yeah. How was the arcade? Fine. Just fine? Dylan was quiet for a long moment. Then, James is nice. That's good. He kept trying to teach me stuff, like how to beat the games better, and he bought me a bunch of tokens. Another pause. But he's not you, Dad. Ethan's throat tightened. No, he's not. Mom kept asking me if I liked him, like she really wanted me to say yes. Did you? I guess, but it felt weird, like she was practicing or something. Kids saw too much, understood too much. Your mom's building a new life out there, Ethan said carefully. And James is part of that. It's okay if it takes time to get used to. Do you like him? Honest question. Deserved an honest answer. I don't really know him, Ethan said. But if he makes your mom happy, then that's good. Even though she left us? The question hung in the air, heavy with hurt. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. Even though. They pulled into the driveway. Dylan unbuckled but didn't move to get out. Dad. Yeah? Are you happy? Second time in a month his son had asked him that question. This time Ethan didn't have to think about the answer. Yeah, Dill, I think I am. Dylan nodded, satisfied with something Ethan couldn't name. Then he grabbed his backpack and headed inside. That night, lying in bed, Ethan's phone lit up with a text from Lena. Thanks for being cool about everything. I know this is weird. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. It's fine. Dylan had a good time. Good. He seems different, more grown up. 3 years will do that. The 3 dots appeared, then, I'm sorry I haven't been around more. Work is just, it's a lot. I know, but I'm trying to do better. James and I talked about it. After we're married, I want Dylan to visit more, maybe even spend summers with us. Ethan's chest tightened. Summers. In San Francisco, with Lena and James and their new perfect life. We can talk about it. Thanks. I mean it, E. You've been a really good dad, better than I deserve. You're his mom. You don't have to earn that. Maybe. But you've done all the hard parts. I see that. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if it was an apology or an acknowledgement or just guilt talking. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Yeah. See you at Mom's. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow. Thanksgiving at Victoria's house. Sitting across from Lena and James and pretending that everything was normal. That his heart didn't race every time Victoria walked into a room. That he wasn't counting down the hours until he could tell the truth. Sleep didn't come easy that night. And when it did, his dreams were full of conversations that went wrong in every possible way. Thanksgiving morning started with Dylan bouncing on Ethan's bed at 6:30, which was somehow both expected and unbearable. Dad, we're going to be late. Dinner's not until 2, Dill. But we have to help Grandma Victoria set up. Ethan dragged himself out of bed, knowing that arguing with a 7-year-old about the concept of time was a losing battle. They ate breakfast, got dressed in the nice clothes Jamie had insisted they wear, and headed out by 10. The Hale estate looked different today. More alive. Cars were already in the driveway, caterers probably, or Victoria's assistant setting things up. The house itself seemed to glow in the cold November light, smoke curling from the chimney, windows warm with interior lights. Dylan ran ahead to the door while Ethan grabbed the pie they'd picked up from the bakery. Store-bought felt inadequate for a dinner like this, but his cooking skills didn't extend much beyond mac and cheese. Victoria answered the door in dark slacks and a cream sweater, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked beautiful and terrified in equal measure. Hey, she said, her eyes meeting Ethan's for just a second before dropping to Dylan. Hi, Grandma Victoria. Dylan threw his arms around her waist. She hugged him back, and Ethan saw something in her expression soften. Hi, sweetheart. Want to help me in the kitchen? Yes. Dylan disappeared inside, leaving Ethan and Victoria in the doorway. She reached out and straightened his collar, a gesture so intimate and natural that they both froze when they realized what she'd done. Sorry, she said, pulling back. Habit. It's fine. Their eyes met again, and Ethan saw all the same anxiety he was feeling reflected back at him. Today was going to be torture. She's in the living room, Victoria said quietly. With James. They got here about 20 minutes ago. Okay. Ethan? I know. We stick to the plan. She nodded, but her hand caught his for just a moment. A brief squeeze. Then she let go and led him inside. The house smelled incredible. Roasting turkey, fresh bread, something sweet baking. In the kitchen, Dylan was already perched on a stool, chattering to one of the caterers while she showed him how to fold napkins. In the living room, Lena and James sat on the couch with wine glasses, looking like they'd stepped out of a catalog. Lena stood when she saw Ethan. "You're early," she said, smiling. Dylan was insistent. James stood too, offering his hand again. "Good to see you, Ethan." They shook, and Ethan forced himself to make small talk about the weather, the drive, the house. All the meaningless conversation that filled space without saying anything real. Victoria appeared with wine for Ethan, and they all settled into the living room. It should have felt comfortable, 4 adults who shared history, finding their way to new ground. But every time Ethan's eyes met Victoria's across the room, every careful avoidance of sitting too close, every word that wasn't being said, made the air feel thicker. "So, Mom," Lena said, curling her legs under her on the couch, "the house looks amazing. Did you redecorate?" "Just the guest room. New paint." "Oh, what color?" "Sage green. Ethan helped, actually." Ethan's heart jumped. Lena's eyes flicked to him, curious. "That's nice of you," she said. "You've always been good at that stuff." It was nothing. Victoria needed the help. "He did most of the work," Victoria added, and Ethan wished she'd stopped talking about it. Turned out beautifully. James, oblivious to the undercurrent, launched into a story about renovating his condo in San Francisco. Ethan half listened, watching Victoria's hands twist in her lap, watching Lena's face as she looked at her mother with something like pride mixed with distance. This family was broken in ways that had nothing to do with him. He was just another crack in an already fractured foundation. Dylan saved them, running in from the kitchen to announce that dinner was almost ready. They moved to the dining room, and Victoria had clearly spent time on the setup. Fine china, crystal glasses, candles, the whole production. It felt formal in a way that made Ethan uncomfortable, like they were playing at being a family instead of actually being one. The seating arrangement was strategic. Victoria at the head of the table, Lena and James on one side, Ethan and Dylan on the other. Maximum distance between Ethan and Victoria. Minimum opportunity for accidental touches or revealing glances. But it also meant Ethan was directly across from Lena, forced to watch her throughout the meal. Dinner started smoothly enough. The food was incredible, the conversation stayed light, and Dylan provided enough entertainment with his stories to fill any awkward silences. But as the wine flowed and the plates were cleared, things started to shift. "So Ethan," James said, refilling his glass, "Lena mentioned you've been single for a while. You dating anyone?" The question landed like a grenade. Ethan felt Victoria stiffen at the end of the table. "Not really," he said carefully. "Been focused on Dylan. That's admirable. But you should get back out there, man. There's plenty of great women in the world." "James?" Lena said quietly. "What? I'm just saying he's a good guy. Deserves to be happy." "I am happy," Ethan said, his voice coming out sharper than he intended. James blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't mean... I know what you meant, but I'm fine. My life is fine." The tension at the table spiked. Lena was staring at him with an expression Ethan couldn't read. Victoria had gone very still, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. "Of course," James said, backtracking. "I just meant, everyone deserves companionship." "Maybe companionship isn't the most important thing," Ethan said. "Maybe some things matter more." He wasn't even sure what he was arguing about anymore. Just knew that this whole charade, the perfect dinner, the polite conversation, the pretending, was wearing him down to nothing. "Like what?" Lena asked quietly. "Like honesty." The word hung in the air. Victoria's eyes met his, a silent plea to stop, to not do this now, not like this. But Ethan was so tired of not saying what he meant. "I think," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the tension, "we should have dessert." "Dylan, want to help me in the kitchen?" "But I'm not done with my turkey." "Bring it with you." Victoria stood and Dylan followed, and suddenly it was just the 3 adults at the table. James looked confused. Lena looked concerned, and Ethan felt like he was about to explode. "Are you okay?" Lena asked him. "I'm fine." You don't seem fine. Well, maybe I'm tired of everyone asking me that. Lena exchanged a glance with James, some silent communication passing between them. Then James stood. I'm going to check on dessert, he said diplomatically, leaving them alone. Lena waited until he was gone, then leaned forward. What's going on with you? Nothing. Ethan, come on, I've known you since we were 16. Something's different. Yeah, well, 3 years will do that, she flinched. Is this about me? About us? No. This has nothing to do with you. Then what? Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the girl he'd loved once upon a time. The girl who'd believed the world was hers for the taking, who'd chosen her dreams over their relationship, and he'd never blamed her for it, not really. But she wasn't that girl anymore. And he wasn't that boy. I've moved on, Lena. That's all. Have you? Because right now it seems like you're angry about something. I'm not angry. You are. And I don't understand why. Because I'm in love with your mother. Because I've been lying to you for weeks. Because this whole dinner is a performance, and I'm exhausted from pretending. But he couldn't say any of that. Not yet. Not like this. I'm just tired, he said finally. It's been a long year. Lena reached across the table, her hand covering his. The gesture was meant to be comforting, but it made Ethan's skin crawl. Not because he had feelings for her, he didn't, not anymore, but because it felt like a violation of what he had with Victoria. He pulled his hand back carefully. Lena's eyes narrowed. There is someone. What? You're seeing someone. That's what this is. Ethan's heart hammered. Lena, it's okay. I mean, I'm getting married. You should be happy too. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Who is she? There's no one. You're a terrible liar, E. You always have been. Before he could respond, Victoria and Dylan returned with pie. The moment shattered, but Ethan could feel Lena watching him for the rest of dessert, putting pieces together in her head. After they ate, Dylan and James ended up in the living room playing some video game, their laughter carrying through the house. Lena went upstairs to take a phone call, which left Ethan and Victoria alone in the dining room, clearing plates in careful silence. That was close, Victoria whispered. She knows something's up, but she doesn't know what. We just need to make it through tonight. And then what? We tell her tomorrow? While she's still in town? Victoria's hand stilled on a wine glass. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe waiting was a mistake. Maybe we should have just been honest from the start. It's too late for that now. Is it? They stared at each other, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on both of them. Then footsteps on the stairs made them jump apart. Lena appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, her expression strange. Mom, can I talk to you for a second? Of course. Ethan, do you mind? I'll finish up here. They disappeared into Victoria's study, and Ethan stood alone in the dining room, heart racing, wondering if this was it, if Lena had figured it out, if the whole careful house of cards was about to collapse. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Ethan finished the dishes and joined Dylan and James in the living room, forcing himself to act normal while his mind raced. Finally, Victoria and Lena emerged. Lena's eyes were red like she'd been crying. Victoria looked shaken. Everything okay? James asked, standing up. Fine, Lena said, but her voice was tight. Just family stuff. She crossed to Ethan, and he braced himself for the confrontation, but instead she just said, Can we talk outside? His stomach dropped. Sure. They walked out onto the porch, the cold November air biting at Ethan's skin. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, staring out at the darkening sky. I'm not coming back, she said quietly. What? To Haven Ridge. After I get married, after we settle in San Francisco, I'm not coming back. She turned to face him. My mom just told me she's selling the estate. The words hit like a physical blow. She's what? She said she's tired of maintaining it alone, tired of waiting for me to care about it the way she does. Lena's voice cracked. She said I made my choice, and now she's making hers. Ethan's mind reeled. Victoria hadn't mentioned selling the house, hadn't said anything about leaving. When did she decide this? I don't know. Recently, I guess. Lena wiped at her eyes. She said she needs to build her own life. Stop living in the past. And I can't even be mad about it because she's right. I left. I built something new. Why shouldn't she? Lena, do you think I'm selfish? She asked suddenly. For leaving, for choosing my career over this place. Ethan thought about the question, really thought about it. No, he said finally. You did what you needed to do, what made you happy. But I hurt people. I hurt you. I hurt my mom. I barely see Dylan. She shook her head. And the worst part is, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to be the person they need me to be without giving up the person I've become. Maybe you don't have to choose. Don't I? She looked at him. You chose. You stayed. You put Dylan first. You did the right thing. It wasn't about right or wrong. It was just what I could live with. They stood in silence for a moment, two people who'd loved each other once, now standing on opposite sides of a chasm neither knew how to cross. I'm glad you're moving on, Lena said softly. Whoever she is, I hope she makes you happy. There's no... Ethan, please, don't lie to me. She smiled sadly. I can see it in your face, the way you've been all evening. You're different, lighter, like you finally stopped carrying around the weight of what I did to you. He wanted to deny it, wanted to keep the secret just a little longer. But looking at Lena now, seeing the guilt and sadness in her eyes, he couldn't. I am, he admitted quietly. I'm seeing someone. Good. That's good. She reached out and squeezed his hand. You deserve it, E. You deserve to be happy. If only she knew. They went back inside. The evening wound down, James and Lena saying their goodbyes, making plans to see Dylan once more before they flew back to San Francisco. Victoria hugged her daughter, and Ethan saw the pain in both their faces, all the things they wanted to say but couldn't. After they left, Victoria collapsed on the couch, exhausted. She knows about you, Ethan said, sitting beside her. I know. She asked me directly if you were seeing someone. What'd you say? I said, I didn't know for sure, but I thought maybe you were. Victoria looked at him. I didn't tell her it was me. She's going to figure it out. I know. They sat in the quiet of the big house, surrounded by the remnants of the dinner party. Dylan had fallen asleep in the armchair, worn out from the day's excitement. You're really selling this place? Ethan asked. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I said it because I was angry. Because Lena was crying about not being able to come home, and all I could think was that she chose not to. That this hasn't been her home in years, and I've been keeping it like a museum waiting for someone who's never coming back. But you love this house. I love what it represented. Family, legacy, roots. She looked around the room. But maybe I've been holding on to the wrong things. Maybe the house isn't what matters. What does matter? Victoria turned to him, and the look in her eyes made his breath catch. You, she said simply. This. Whatever we're building, that matters. Ethan reached for her hand, no longer caring if Dylan might wake up and see. We're still telling her? We have to. When? Before she leaves, this weekend. Victoria squeezed his hand. I can't keep lying to her, even by omission. It's going to hurt her. I know, but not telling her will hurt worse, eventually. They sat like that for a while, holding hands in the dim light, Dylan's soft breathing the only sound. It felt like the calm before a storm, the last moment of peace before everything changed. Finally, Ethan woke Dylan and carried him out to the truck. At the door, Victoria stopped him. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for today, for trying. We both tried. She nodded, and for a moment he thought she might kiss him, but instead she just touched his cheek, a gesture so tender it made his chest ache. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. Okay. Driving home through the dark streets, Dylan drowsy in the passenger seat, Ethan felt the weight of what was coming. In less than 48 hours, they'd tell Lena the truth, and everything, the careful balance, the stolen moments, the fragile peace, would shatter. But as he glanced at his phone and saw Victoria's message, just 3 words, thank you, tonight, he knew it would be worth it. Because whatever happened next, at least it would be honest. At least it would be real. The next day, Friday, passed in agonizing slowness. Ethan kept waiting for the call from Victoria saying it was time, but the call didn't come. Instead, he got a text from Lena. "Can we meet, just us? Before I leave." His heart sank. "Sure. When? Tomorrow morning? Coffee at Rosie's? Okay. 9 a.m.? See you then?" Ethan stared at the message, dread pooling in his stomach. This was it. Somehow Lena had figured it out, and she wanted to hear it from him before confronting Victoria. He called Victoria immediately. "She wants to meet me tomorrow," he said without preamble. "Lena?" "Yeah, coffee. Just the two of us." He paused. "I think she knows." Victoria was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. "Victoria? We should tell her together, like we planned. I don't think we have that option anymore." "Then what do you want to do?" Ethan closed his eyes. "I want to stop running. I want to walk into that coffee shop and tell her the truth." "Without me there?" "You can come if you want, but I think this is something I need to do." "Ethan, I'm not ashamed of us, Victoria. I'm not going to sit there and apologize for being happy. Not anymore." She was quiet again. Then, "Okay, but I'm telling her too. After you meet. I'm not letting you take this alone. Deal." That night, Ethan barely slept. He rehearsed 100 different versions of the conversation, tried to find the words that would make Lena understand, that would minimize the hurt, but there were no right words. No way to soften this blow. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Ethan dropped Dylan at Jamie's, deflecting her questions about why he looked like death, and headed to Rosie's diner. Lena was already there, sitting in a back booth with 2 coffees. She looked tired, older than her years in the harsh fluorescent light. "Hey," she said as he slid in across from her. "Hey." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Lena pushed one of the coffees toward him. "Black, no sugar. Some things don't change." "Thanks." She wrapped her hands around her own mug, staring into it like it held answers. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said finally, "about you seeing someone." "Lena, let me finish." She looked up at him. "I'm happy for you, I really am. But there's something you need to know." Ethan's heart raced. "What?" "When I was talking to my mom yesterday, she was different, defensive, like she was protecting something." Lena's eyes searched his face. "And you were different too. Both of you, all night. And I kept trying to figure out what it was." "Lena, I can explain." "Oh, it's her, isn't it?" The words came out flat. Not a question, a statement. "You're seeing my mother." The truth sat between them like a live wire. Ethan could have denied it, could have lied one more time, but he was done lying. "Yes," he said quietly. Lena's face went pale. She set down her coffee with shaking hands. "How long?" "A few weeks. Not long." "A few weeks." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "My mother. You're sleeping with my mother." "It's not like that." "What is it like, Ethan? Please explain it to me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're fucking my mom." Her voice had risen, and other diners were starting to glance over. Ethan felt his face burn. "Keep your voice down." "Don't tell me what to do." But she lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "How could you? How could both of you?" "Lena, you left. You moved on. You're getting married. That doesn't give you the right to—" She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. "Oh my God. Dylan. Does Dylan know?" "No. We were going to tell you first. We were going to—" "When? After I left? After you'd been sneaking around behind my back for months?" "It hasn't been months, and we weren't trying to hurt you." "But you did." Her eyes were bright with tears. "You both did. You and my mom, the 2 people I trusted most in the world, and you." She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan felt his own throat tighten. "I'm sorry. I know this is complicated." "Complicated? That's what you're going with?" Lena shook her head. "You know what the worst part is? I can't even be completely mad. Because you're right. I did leave. I did choose my life over this town, over you, over everything. So who am I to tell you how to live your life now?" "Lena, but she's my mother, Ethan. My mother. And you were mine first. I was never yours. Not really. We were kids who thought we knew what forever meant." The words came out harsher than he intended, Lena flinched like he'd slapped her. Is that what you tell yourself? She asked quietly. That what we had didn't matter? No, it mattered, but it ended. And I've spent 3 years trying to figure out who I am without you, and I finally did. He leaned forward. I'm not going to apologize for that. Even if it means being with my mother? Even then. They stared at each other across the table, years of history and hurt and unfinished business sitting between them. Finally, Lena stood up. I need to go. Lena, wait. No, I can't. I can't do this right now. She grabbed her coat. Tell my mom I'll call her. Or don't. I don't care. Lena. But she was already walking away, leaving Ethan alone in the booth with 2 cold cups of coffee and the wreckage of everything he'd been trying to protect. He sat there for a long time, feeling the eyes of other diners on him, hearing the whispers starting. By tomorrow, the whole town would know. Finally, he paid and left. In his truck, he called Victoria. She knows, he said when she answered. I know. She just called me. Victoria's voice was thick with tears. She said some things. About us. About me being a terrible mother. Victoria, she's right. What kind of mother does this? The kind who deserves to be happy too. At what cost? Victoria's voice broke. Ethan, she hates me. My daughter hates me. She's hurt. She'll come around. Will she? Because right now it doesn't feel like she ever will. Ethan closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the seat. Do you regret it? Us? The question hung in the silence, then quietly, no. But maybe I should. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and final. Ethan gripped the phone tighter, staring through his windshield at nothing. Don't say that, he said quietly. Why not? Maybe regret would be easier than this. Victoria, listen to me. I can't do this right now, Ethan. I need to think. The line went dead. Ethan sat in the parking lot of Rosie's diner, rain streaking down the windshield, and felt the foundation of everything he'd been building crack wide open. He'd known this would be hard, known that telling Lena would hurt her, but he hadn't anticipated the guilt that came with actually doing it. The way her face had crumpled, the way Victoria's voice had broken over the phone. He'd hurt people he cared about. And for what? For a few weeks of feeling alive again? For stolen moments and secret touches that were now exposed to the harsh light of judgment? His phone buzzed. Jamie, Dylan's asking when you're picking him up. Everything okay? No, nothing was okay. But he couldn't tell his sister that. Couldn't explain that he'd just blown up his life and possibly Victoria's too. Be there in 20. He drove to Jamie's house on autopilot, his mind replaying the conversation with Lena over and over, the hurt in her eyes, the betrayal. He'd expected anger, but the quiet devastation had been worse. When he arrived, Dylan came running out, backpack bouncing. Dad, Aunt Jamie said we can get pizza for dinner. Sure, bud. Yeet. Jamie appeared in the doorway, took one look at Ethan's face, and her expression shifted from casual to concerned. Dylan, go wait in the truck, she said. I need to talk to your dad for a second. Once Dylan was out of earshot, Jamie crossed her arms. What happened? Nothing. Ethan, I've known you your whole life. Don't bullshit me. He almost laughed. Almost. I screwed up, Jamie. Bad. How bad? Bad enough that Lena's probably never speaking to me again. Jamie's eyebrows shot up. What did you do? He stopped, the words catching in his throat. But he was tired of lying. So tired. I've been seeing someone. Victoria. Victoria who... Recognition dawned on Jamie's face. Victoria Hale? Lena's mother, Victoria? Yeah. Jamie stared at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that came from pure shock. Holy shit, Ethan. I know. Lena's mom. You're sleeping with Lena's mom. Can you not say it like that? How else should I say it? But Jamie's laughter faded as she studied his face. You really care about her. It wasn't a question. Yeah, I do. And Lena found out? This morning. It went about as well as you'd expect. Jamie blew out a breath. Okay. Well, you've really stepped in it this time. Thanks. Super helpful. What do you want me to say? That it's fine? That you didn't just complicate your life in the most spectacular way possible? She shook her head. But I also can't say I'm surprised. What does that mean? It means I've seen the way you've been the past few weeks. Different. Like you finally stopped sleepwalking through your life. She put her hand on his arm. Is she worth it? The question cut straight to the heart of everything. Was Victoria worth the pain he'd caused? Worth the damage to his relationship with Lena? Worth the gossip that was probably already spreading through Haven Ridge like wildfire? Yes, he said, and meant it. Jamie nodded slowly. Then you fight for it. You don't run. You don't hide. You stand there and take whatever comes, and you fight for what matters. Even if it costs me everything else? Especially then. Because what's the alternative? Spending the rest of your life wondering what if? She squeezed his arm. You've already lost enough, E. Don't lose this too. Ethan pulled his sister into a hug, grateful for her in a way he couldn't put into words. When he pulled back, she was smiling. Now go get your kid some pizza, and maybe call Victoria, because something tells me she needs to hear that you're not giving up. Ethan tried calling Victoria 3 times that afternoon. Each time it went to voicemail. He texted. No response. By the time Dylan was in bed that night, the silence had become its own kind of torture. He drove to the estate around 10, knowing it was probably a bad idea, but unable to stop himself. The house was dark, except for one light on the second floor, Victoria's bedroom. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again, louder. Finally, the door opened. Victoria stood there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, eyes red from crying, hair a mess. She looked at him without saying anything. I called, Ethan said. I know. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house felt different now, colder, like all the warmth had been sucked out of it. They walked to the kitchen in silence, and Victoria poured herself a glass of wine without offering him one. Lena left this afternoon, she said, staring into her glass. Didn't even say goodbye in person. Just texted that she and James were catching an earlier flight. Victoria, she said I chose you over her, that I betrayed her for a man who was never going to stay anyway. Victoria's voice cracked. She said I'd lost her father, and now I'd lost her too, and it was my own fault. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. She was angry. She didn't mean... She meant every word. Victoria looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. And maybe she's right. Maybe I am selfish. Maybe I should have thought about her before we... Don't do this. Do what? Pretend this was a mistake. Pretend we didn't both choose this. But at what cost, Ethan? She set down her wine glass hard enough that it cracked against the counter. My daughter hates me. The whole town is going to know by tomorrow. And for what? For a few weeks of feeling something other than lonely? Is that really what you think this is? I don't know what this is anymore. Ethan closed the distance between them, taking her face in his hands. She tried to pull away, but he held on. Look at me, he said firmly. Look at me and tell me this was just about not being lonely. Tell me you don't feel what I feel. Ethan, tell me. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I can't. Then don't push me away because you're scared. Don't give up on this because it got hard. It's not just hard, it's impossible. You and me, we're not supposed to... Why? Because of Lena? Because of what people will think? He shook his head. I've spent 3 years living my life based on what other people thought I should do, and it made me miserable. I'm not doing that anymore. Even if it means losing everything? I already lost everything once. I survived it. But this? He gestured between them. This is the first thing that's felt real in years, and I'm not walking away from it. Not without a fight. Victoria closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, but we figure it out. Together. She leaned her forehead against his chest, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake with silent sobs. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet kitchen, both knowing that the hard part was just beginning. Finally, Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. She might never forgive me, she whispered. Maybe not, but that's her choice, just like this is ours. And if she tries to keep Dylan from me? The question hit like a sledgehammer. Ethan hadn't even considered that possibility. Lena using Dylan as leverage. weaponizing his relationship with Victoria against them both. "We'll deal with it," he said, with more confidence than he felt. Victoria searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. But Ethan held her gaze steady and certain. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." The weekend passed in tense quiet. Ethan waited for the fallout, the phone calls from judgmental acquaintances, the whispers at the grocery store, the inevitable confrontation with people who thought they had a right to an opinion about his life. But the storm didn't break the way he expected. Instead, it started with Marcus showing up at his door Sunday afternoon with a six-pack of beer and a knowing look. "Heard you caused some excitement at Rosie's yesterday," Marcus said, pushing past Ethan into the house. "News travels fast. Small town, you know how it is." Marcus handed him a beer. "So, Victoria Hale. Really? Really?" Marcus took a long drink, considering. Bold choice. "Wasn't really a choice, just kind of happened." "That's not how it works, and you know it. You chose this. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next." Ethan thought about Victoria's tear-stained face, about Lena's anger, about the careful life he'd built that was now completely exposed. "Honestly, I have no idea what comes next." "Well, whatever it is, you're going to need friends." Marcus clinked his beer against Ethan's. "And I'm still here. For whatever that's worth." It was worth more than Marcus probably knew. Monday morning brought the real test. Ethan dropped Dylan off at school and immediately felt the eyes on him. Parents who'd always been friendly suddenly found reasons to look away. Conversation stopped when he approached. One mother actually pulled her kid away when Dylan ran over to play. It stung. But Ethan kept his head up and walked back to his truck, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. At the shop, it was better. The guys he worked with didn't care who he was sleeping with as long as he showed up on time and did his job. But he caught the knowing looks, the smirks, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room. By Tuesday, the gossip had reached a fever pitch. Catherine Wright, the same woman who'd asked Victoria about Ethan at the foundation board meeting, apparently decided to make it her personal mission to comment on the situation. She posted something vague on social media about inappropriate relationships and respecting family boundaries, and half the town jumped in with their opinions. Victoria called him that evening, her voice tight. "Have you seen the Facebook posts?" "No, and I'm not going to." "People are saying terrible things about both of us. They're saying I'm predatory, that you're using me for money, that we're both—" Her voice broke. "I can't do this, Ethan. I can't have everyone in town talking about me like this." "Then don't read it. Block them. Delete your account, whatever you need to do." "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. Other people's opinions don't get to dictate our lives." "But they do. That's the reality. This is a small town and people talk and it affects everything. My business relationships, your custody of Dylan, our ability to just exist without judgment." "Victoria." He cut her off, his voice firm. "Are you happy? When you're with me, are you happy?" The question hung in the air. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Then that's all that matters. The rest is just noise." Easy for you to say. You don't have a board of directors questioning your judgment. You don't have business partners asking if you're having a midlife crisis. Ethan felt frustration rising. "So what do you want to do? End it? Go back to being miserable but respectable?" "I don't know. I need time to think." "How much time?" "I don't know that either." They hung up with nothing resolved, and Ethan felt the first real tendrils of doubt creeping in. Maybe this was too hard. Maybe the cost was too high. Maybe Jamie had been wrong, and some things weren't worth fighting for. But then he thought about Victoria's laugh, the way she looked at him like he mattered, the quiet mornings in her kitchen, and the way his life had finally started to feel like it belonged to him instead of being something he was just enduring. No, he wasn't giving up. Not yet. Wednesday afternoon, Ethan was under a car when his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Cole? This is Patricia Martinez from Haven Ridge Elementary." His heart dropped. "Is Dylan okay?" "He's fine. But there was an incident today at school. One of the other parents complained about you being around the children. They said something about inappropriate behavior and questioned whether you should be allowed at school events." Ethan felt rage flood through him, hot and immediate. Are you serious? I'm required to inform you when complaints are made. For the record, I think the complaint is baseless and rooted in gossip rather than any legitimate concern. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. Who made the complaint? I can't share that information. But Ethan already knew. Catherine Wright, who'd been stirring up trouble since this whole thing started. What happens now? He asked, trying to keep his voice level. Nothing. The complaint has been noted and dismissed. But Mr. Cole, I'd recommend keeping a low profile for a while. Let things settle down. After he hung up, Ethan sat in his truck and called Victoria. She answered on the first ring. Someone tried to get me banned from Dylan's school, he said without preamble. What? He explained the call. Victoria was silent for a long moment. This is my fault, she said finally. If I hadn't, stop. This isn't your fault. This is people being small-minded and cruel. But they're targeting you because of me. Your relationship with Dylan is being affected because some people have nothing better to do than judge other people's lives. Ethan took a breath. Victoria, I need to know if you're in this. Really in this. Because if you are, we face this together. But if you're not, if you're going to keep second-guessing every time things get hard, then maybe we need to end it now. The ultimatum hung between them. Ethan hadn't meant to force her hand, but he was tired of living in limbo, tired of wondering if she was going to walk away the next time someone said something cruel. That's not fair, Victoria said quietly. Life's not fair, but we still have to make choices. She was silent for so long he thought she'd hung up. Then, I'm scared. I know. Not just of what people think. I'm scared of losing Lena forever. I'm scared of messing up your life. I'm scared that I'm being selfish and stupid and what? And I'm scared that you're going to realize I'm not worth all this trouble. The vulnerability in her voice broke something open in Ethan's chest. Come here, he said. What? Come to my house, right now. We need to stop having this conversation over the phone. Ethan, please. 20 minutes later, Victoria pulled into his driveway. Ethan met her at the door, and the moment he saw her face, exhausted, scared, trying so hard to hold it together, he pulled her inside and kissed her. Not gentle, not careful, but desperate and honest, and full of everything he couldn't put into words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria's eyes were bright with tears. I'm in, she whispered. I'm scared out of my mind, but I'm in. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing it anyway. Ethan pulled her close, and she buried her face in his chest. They stood in his living room, cluttered with Dylan's toys, smelling faintly of the burnt dinner he'd attempted last night, so different from her pristine estate. And for the first time in days, something settled. We're going to get through this, he said into her hair. How do you know? Because we're not running anymore. We're standing still and dealing with it. He pulled back to look at her. And because I love you. The words were out before he could stop them. Victoria's eyes went wide. You... What? I love you. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was scared too. Scared of what it meant, but I'm done being scared. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Victoria. Not because you're safe or convenient or any other bullshit reason. I love you because you make me want to be honest. Because you see me, really see me, and you're still here. Because my life makes sense when you're in it. Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. I love you too. I've been trying not to because it felt wrong or complicated but you do. Yes, I do. They kissed again, softer this time, full of relief and promise and the kind of certainty that only came from choosing something despite all the reasons not to. That night they talked for hours. About Lena, about Dylan, about what came next. They made plans, real plans. Victoria would reach out to Lena, try to start rebuilding that bridge even if it took years. Ethan would talk to Dylan, explain things in an age-appropriate way before someone else did. They'd stop hiding, stop apologizing for being together. And they'd let the rest of the world think whatever it wanted. The next few weeks were brutal. The gossip didn't die down so much as evolve into background noise. Some people stopped speaking to them. Others surprised them with support. Marcus and his wife had them over for dinner. Jamie became Victoria's unlikely ally, defending her to anyone who dared criticize within earshot. Dylan handled it better than expected. When Ethan finally sat him down and explained, carefully, simply, that he and Grandma Victoria had become more than friends, Dylan's main concern was whether this meant he'd get to spend more time at her house. "Because she has better snacks than we do," he said seriously. Ethan had to laugh. Lena was harder. She didn't respond to Victoria's calls or emails for 3 weeks. Then finally, a text. "I need time. Don't contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't permanent estrangement either. Victoria cried when she got it, but they were different tears. Hopeful tears. She didn't say never, Victoria kept repeating. She said when. That's something. By mid-December, things had settled into a new normal. Ethan spent most nights at Victoria's estate, Dylan with them on weekends. They went to Dylan's soccer games together, weathering the stares and whispers with their heads held high. They had dinner at Marcus and Linda's. They drove into the city for a weekend, just the two of them, and walked around like normal people without the weight of judgment. And slowly, painfully, Ethan felt the pieces of his life rearranging into something that actually fit. Christmas Eve, they decorated Victoria's house together, Dylan hanging ornaments while singing off-key carols, Victoria laughing at Ethan's terrible attempts at stringing lights, all of them covered in tinsel and cookie crumbs by the time they finished. Later, after Dylan was asleep upstairs in the guest room with the sage-green walls, Ethan and Victoria sat by the fire with glasses of wine. "I'm selling the business," Victoria said quietly. Ethan looked at her in surprise. "What?" "The Hale Companies, the whole empire my father built. I'm selling it." She turned to face him. "I don't want to spend my life managing other people's dreams. I want to figure out what mine are." "Victoria, you don't have to." "I know, but I want to. I've been thinking about it since Thanksgiving, since Lena said I needed to build my own life." She smiled. "Turns out she was right." "What will you do?" "I don't know yet. Maybe travel. Maybe start something small, something that actually matters to me. Maybe just exist for a while without a plan." She took his hand. "But whatever I do, I want to do it without carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Sounds perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire, listening to the old house settle around them. "Do you think she'll ever really forgive us?" Victoria asked. "Lena? Maybe, eventually. Or maybe she won't, and we'll have to live with that." "And you're okay with that?" "No, but I'm okay with us, and that has to be enough." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of living half a life." "Me too." On Christmas morning, Dylan woke them up at dawn, dragging them downstairs to presents. They made pancakes in the kitchen, flour ending up everywhere, Dylan chattering about the bike Santa had brought him. Later, Jamie and her family came over, and Marcus and Linda, and the house filled with noise and laughter and the chaotic warmth of people who'd chosen to be there. In the afternoon, Ethan found Victoria standing alone on the porch, looking out at the snow-covered grounds. "You okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "About how a year ago I spent Christmas alone in this house, and how different everything is now." "Better different?" She turned in his arms, her eyes bright. "So much better, even with all the hard parts. Even with Lena still not talking to me. Even with half the town thinking I'm having a midlife crisis." She kissed him softly. "This is the first Christmas in years where I actually feel alive." "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." They stood like that for a while, holding each other while snow fell softly around them. Inside, they could hear Dylan laughing, Jamie telling some ridiculous story, the clink of glasses and the warmth of people choosing to love each other despite all the complicated reasons not to. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. Not the kind that came from avoiding conflict or keeping everyone happy, but the kind that came from making hard choices and standing by them, from choosing honesty over comfort, from loving someone not because it was easy, but because it was real. 3 months later in March, Victoria's phone rang while they were making dinner. She glanced at the screen and froze. "It's Lena." Ethan's heart jumped. "Answer it." Victoria stared at the phone for another ring. Then she picked up, her hand shaking slightly. "Hello?" Ethan couldn't hear Lena's side of the conversation, but he watched Victoria's face shift through a dozen emotions: fear, hope, pain, relief. "Okay," Victoria said quietly. "Yes, I understand. Thank you for calling. I love you too." She hung up, tears streaming down her face. "She wants to talk," Victoria said. "Not now, not soon. But eventually, she said she needs more time, but she doesn't want to lose me forever." "That's good, right?" "It's better than good. It's everything." Victoria laughed through her tears. "She didn't forgive me, not yet. But she's willing to try." Ethan pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake with relief. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There would be more hard conversations, more hurt feelings, more bridges to rebuild. But it was a start. That evening, after Dylan was in bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the porch in the cool spring air. The house behind them glowed with warm light, and somewhere in the distance they could hear the first crickets of the season. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. About us? About this?" He gestured vaguely at the house, at the life they'd built in the spaces between judgment and acceptance. "I know we've been taking it slow, figuring things out as we go, but I want you to know that I'm not just here for now. I'm here for as long as you'll have me." Victoria turned to look at him, and in the dim light, her eyes were soft. "Is that your way of saying you're moving in?" she asked with a small smile. "Maybe, if you want me to." "I want you to." She took his hand. "I want all of it. The mess, and the complications, and Dylan's cleats all over my floor, and your terrible coffee in my kitchen. I want the life we're building, even though it's nothing like what I thought my life would look like. Better or worse? Different, but real." She squeezed his hand. "And real is better than anything I've had before." They sat in the quiet, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere inside, Dylan was probably sneaking time on his tablet instead of sleeping. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new judgments, new reasons for people to question their choices. But tonight, Ethan wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about how 3 years ago he'd been frozen, numb, going through the motions of a life that belonged to someone else. How he'd driven to this house in the rain, looking for advice on how to start over, and instead found something he hadn't even known he was searching for. Not comfort, not an escape, but truth. The truth that moving on didn't mean forgetting, that choosing yourself wasn't selfish, that love didn't have to make sense to everyone else as long as it made sense to you. The truth that sometimes the hardest choices were the ones that finally set you free. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. "That I spent 3 years afraid of being happy," Ethan said. "Afraid that if I moved forward, I'd be betraying the past, or that I didn't deserve it, or that it wouldn't last. And now? Now I know that happiness isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose, even when it's complicated, even when it costs you." He turned to look at her. "Especially then." Victoria's eyes glistened in the starlight. "I chose you," she said simply. "Over peace, over my daughter's approval, over what anyone else thought. And I'd do it again." "Me too." They kissed, soft and slow, and Ethan felt the last piece of himself that had been holding back finally let go. This was his life now. Messy and imperfect, and nothing like the story he'd imagined at 17. But it was his, built on choices instead of obligations, on honesty instead of pretense, on love that didn't ask permission. Inside the house, Dylan called out that he couldn't sleep. Victoria laughed, wiping her eyes, and they went in together to deal with bedtime negotiations and requests for water. And one more story. And as Ethan tucked his son in, listening to Victoria read from Dylan's favorite book in that calm, steady voice that had become home to him, he realized something. He wasn't chasing a life anymore, wasn't reaching for some future version of happiness that always stayed just out of reach. He was living it, right here, right now, in this moment, and that was enough.